It started with one small favor, the kind of thing you agree to, because family makes you feel guilty if you say no, and because in that moment, you don't imagine how quickly it can spiral out of control. My cousin had this way of speaking like everything was urgent, like every little inconvenience was a disaster, and when he asked to borrow my credit card just in case of emergencies, I actually believed him. I remember the exact words he used. "I won't even touch it unless my car breaks down or I need groceries. You can trust me." And I wanted to believe that because he was family, because growing up we'd been taught that blood meant loyalty, and because I didn't think anyone in my circle could look me in the eye and lie so easily. I handed him that little piece of plastic worth $12,000 in available credit, and I thought it was nothing. 2 weeks later, I opened my phone, scrolled through Instagram, and saw him posting in a brand new designer jacket, captioned "New Drip." My stomach dropped so hard I actually had to sit down. I felt the heat rush to my face. My fingers went cold, and I couldn't process how quickly my so-called emergency had turned into him flaunting my money for likes. That moment was the crack in everything I thought I knew about trust, about family, and about how far someone could go when they thought they had me cornered. The truth is, my cousin had always been the kind of guy who lived for appearances. Back when we were kids, he was the one sneaking into my uncle's closet to try on gold chains and oversized sneakers, strutting around like he was already famous while the rest of us laughed and rolled our eyes. But the older we got, the more serious that obsession became. He wasn't just playing dress-up anymore. He was chasing this image of himself as someone untouchable, wealthy, admired, and most of all, envied. I should have noticed the warning signs. He always had the latest phone, the freshest pair of Jordans, the kind of stuff he couldn't possibly afford on the paycheck he claimed to be earning. He'd brush it off with a grin, saying things like, "Don't worry, I got connects," or "Just know I stay winning." But deep down, I knew there was no way he was funding all that on his own. When he came to me with that desperate plea about needing a backup for emergencies, I felt trapped between my better judgment and the guilt of being the responsible one. My whole family saw me as the reliable cousin, the one who always had her bills paid on time, the one who had a decent job, the one who was careful. And with that reputation came pressure. If I said no, I was being selfish, cold, even disloyal. My aunt had even once said to me, "He just needs guidance, not rejection." So I caved. I told myself I could keep an eye on the account, and the moment I saw anything suspicious, I'd shut it down. But that promise was easier said than done. Life got busy, work was stressful, and I didn't check my statements daily the way I should have. When I finally did, there it was. Line after line of charges that didn't belong to me. High-end streetwear boutiques, sneaker drops, exclusive cologne launches, and restaurants I'd never stepped foot in. Over $5,000 gone in less than 2 weeks. And while my heart raced at the thought of what he'd done, I felt my stomach churn when I realized how cleverly he'd timed it. The payments hadn't even hit the due date yet, so technically, he thought he was safe. To him, it was free money for the time being. And he figured he could either charm me into covering it or guilt me into understanding. That was when I opened Instagram and saw him flexing. Not just the clothes, but the very words that mocked me. New drip. He wasn't just spending my money. He was celebrating it, as if making me his personal bank was some kind of achievement worth showing off to the world. That smug smile on his face in the photo was burned into my mind, and in that instant, something inside me hardened. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to let him humiliate me publicly and then privately expect me to stay quiet. No, I was already planning exactly how I was going to end this. And he had no idea that his little game had just cost him everything. I didn't confront him right away because I knew if I rushed in with anger, he'd just twist it back on me like he always did. That was his specialty. Gaslighting, spinning the story until suddenly you were the unreasonable one. I'd seen him do it with girlfriends, with his mom, even with my grandmother when he borrowed her jewelry and claimed she'd given it to him as a gift. No, this time I had to be smarter. So I started quietly documenting everything. I screenshotted his posts, the receipts from the boutiques, the timestamps on my credit card statements, even the geotags on his Instagram photos that matched the addresses of the charges. Every little piece of evidence stacked up like bricks in a wall I was building to protect myself. When I finally called him, I kept my voice calm. I asked how he was doing, if everything was okay. He acted like nothing was wrong, like we were just catching up. So I slipped the trap. "Funny," I said lightly, "I saw your post the other day." That jacket's fire. Which card did you use for that? There was a pause, just a second too long, but long enough to confirm what I already knew. Then he laughed, this fake, careless laugh, and said, "Chill, it's just a phase. I'll pay you back before you even notice. Don't make it a big deal." My chest tightened, but I didn't let it show. Instead, I told him calmly that I'd already spoken to the bank, that they were investigating fraudulent charges, and that if he wanted to avoid being labeled as the culprit, he needed to sit down with me immediately and figure this out. The silence on the other end of the line was everything. He thought I'd just roll over, cover his mess, and keep my mouth shut to protect family. He didn't realize that I'd been raised to survive storms, not to bend to them. The next day, he showed up at my place wearing another new pair of sneakers, acting casual, like he could charm me into forgiving him. But I was done. I laid the statements out on the table, one by one, each charge highlighted, each receipt stapled to the page. "This is what you did," I said. "And you're going to pay every cent back." He smirked, leaning back in his chair like it was all a joke. "Or what? You gonna call the cops on your own cousin?" His arrogance might have worked on others, but it only fueled me more. I didn't flinch, I didn't raise my voice. I looked him straight in the eye and said, "Yes. If you don't fix this, that's exactly what I'll do. And I have more than enough evidence to prove it." The smirk slipped for the first time, and that's when I knew. I had him cornered. He tried to bluff his way through it, the way he always did. You think the cops care about a couple of charges? Please, they've got bigger things to worry about. But I didn't let him see me waver. I already knew the truth. Banks don't play around when it comes to fraud, especially when the evidence is neatly tied together. If he thought this was just a couple of charges, he hadn't realized he'd crossed the threshold into federal crime territory. Over $5,000 meant wire fraud, and that wasn't something you walked away from with a slap on the wrist. I leaned forward, my voice steady. This isn't about the cops caring. This is about the bank's lawyers caring. And trust me, they care. His eyes flickered then, just for a moment, like the reality was sinking in. But instead of owning up, he doubled down. "Fine," he said. "I'll get you the money. Just give me time." That was the problem. Time was the one thing I wasn't giving him anymore. I told him I'd already frozen the card, already filed a dispute with the bank, and already marked every charge he made as unauthorized. His mouth dropped open, and for the first time, he didn't have a comeback. You wouldn't do that," he stammered. But I had, and the weight of that truth was settling over him like a heavy blanket. Later that week, the fallout began. He called me, furious, saying the bank had flagged his name and the boutiques were demanding their merchandise back. He blamed me for ruining his rep, as if his reputation was something I owed him. "You're supposed to have my back," he shouted over the phone. I stayed calm. "Family doesn't mean I let you rob me," I said. "Family doesn't mean I destroy myself so you can play pretend." He screamed, cursed, told me I was dead to him, but I didn't waver. I'd already seen too clearly who he was, and what I had to do to protect myself. What he didn't know yet was that I wasn't finished. He thought losing the card was the end. But I was only just beginning to show him the cost of trying to make me his personal ATM. Word spread through the family faster than I expected. My aunt called me first, her voice dripping with practiced disappointment. "You didn't have to humiliate him like this. He's young, he makes mistakes." I bit back the urge to laugh. Young? He was 27, old enough to know better, old enough to know that flashing someone else's money wasn't just a mistake. I told her calmly that I hadn't humiliated him. He had done that himself the moment he put my card into a designer store's machine and then posted the proof online. But she wouldn't hear it. She tried the same tired guilt tactics. "He looks up to you. You've always been the strong one. If you don't help him, who will?" That was when it hit me. This wasn't just about him. This was about the whole family's pattern of enabling. He had always been the golden child, the one they coddled, the one they excused. And I had always been the reliable one, the one they leaned on to clean up the mess. It was like a switch flipped inside me. I told her in the coldest, clearest tone I'd ever used, "I'm not your safety net. Not anymore." She gasped like I had just cursed at her, and then hung up. The calls didn't stop there. My uncle tried. My grandmother even sent a text asking me to be merciful. But none of them offered to pay me back. None of them offered to hold him accountable. They wanted me to carry it all, again, to keep the family peace. But there was no peace left to keep. That weekend, he showed up at a barbecue acting like nothing had happened, as if we hadn't just gone to war over thousands of dollars. He slapped backs, laughed loudly, wore another new pair of shoes I knew he couldn't have bought with his own money. Then he tried to corner me in the kitchen, lowering his voice so no one else could hear. "You're making me look bad. Just drop the dispute. I'll figure it out. Don't make this worse." He leaned in, his face inches from mine, that smug smirk curling at the corner of his mouth. For a split second, I felt the old guilt stir, the old instinct to avoid conflict. But then I remembered the Instagram caption, the credit card statement, the nights I stayed awake calculating how I'd cover the debt if the bank sided against me. And I realized he was right about one thing. I was making him look bad, because the truth was finally catching up, and for once, I wasn't going to shield him from it. The bank investigation moved faster than even I anticipated. Within days, I got an official call. Their fraud department had confirmed the charges were unauthorized. They told me I wouldn't be responsible for paying them, and that the matter would now be escalated for potential criminal review. I felt a weight lift off my chest, but I also knew this was the moment where everything in the family was about to shift. Sure enough, my cousin blew up my phone with frantic calls and messages. First, he tried fake bravado. "You think this scares me? They can't touch me." Then came the bargaining. "Okay, just tell them it was a misunderstanding and I'll pay you back little by little." And finally, the desperation. "Please don't let them ruin my life. You're my cousin. You can fix this." I ignored every single one. I wasn't going to be his lifeline anymore, but the ripple effect was brutal. My aunt cornered me in front of relatives, practically hissing that I'd destroyed her son's future. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I simply said, "He destroyed it himself," and walked away. That line followed me like a shield because it was the undeniable truth. And yet, as strong as I felt, I wasn't blind to the storm I'd unleashed. I started getting side eyes at family gatherings, whispers that I was cold, that I'd forgotten where I came from. But while they whispered, my cousin's reality was changing in real time. Stores began clawing back merchandise he couldn't afford to keep. His credit took a nosedive after the fraud report went on record. The same friends who hyped his drip online suddenly disappeared when he couldn't pick up the tab. And then came the letter, an official notice that his actions had triggered a full fraud claim that could lead to charges if restitution wasn't made. He came to me one last time, his swagger stripped away, his eyes darting like a cornered animal. "Please," he whispered, "just take it back. Tell them I had your permission." For a long moment, I just looked at him, remembering every time he'd laughed in my face, every time he'd flaunted my money like a trophy. And then I said the words that finally ended it. "I'd rather let them press charges than let you use me again." His jaw tightened, his fists clenched. But he knew. It was over. After that day, the silence between us was louder than any argument we'd ever had. He stopped posting his flashy outfits online, stopped showing up at family gatherings with that cocky grin. Instead, the updates about him came in whispers. How he'd tried to get another cousin to loan him money and got turned down. How he was pawning off sneakers and watches to scrape together cash. How he'd even lost his job after his boss found out about the fraud investigation. His whole image had crumbled, and without it, he had nothing to hide behind. My aunt still tried to guilt me, of course. She called crying late at night, saying things like, "He's depressed. He's not himself. You've got to forgive him before it's too late." But I stayed firm. I reminded her that forgiveness didn't mean handing over my stability or letting myself be robbed again. "He can get help," I told her, "but not from me." Not like that. She hung up on me, furious, but I didn't flinch. Because in that moment, I realized this wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about finally stepping out of a role I'd been forced into my entire life. The fixer, the responsible one, the one who pays for everyone else's mistakes. My cousin had been bold enough to steal from me because he thought I would never actually hold him accountable. The rest of the family had expected me to cave because that's what I always did. But not this time. This time I chose myself. And even though it meant walking into family gatherings with my head held high while others whispered, even though it meant being painted as the villain in his story, I knew the truth. Villains don't build walls of evidence to protect themselves. Villains don't say no when they're being used. Villains don't save themselves from being drained dry. What I did wasn't villainy, it was survival. And for once, I was finally done apologizing for it. The final blow came when the bank officially closed their investigation and sent me a clean letter. I was cleared of all liability. The account balance reset and my credit fully restored. Reading those words felt like oxygen after weeks of suffocating under everyone's judgment. My cousin, on the other hand, wasn't so lucky. The bank informed him he was responsible for restitution, and when he couldn't pay, they filed a report with local authorities. It didn't mean handcuffs right away, but it meant a record, a scarlet letter that would follow him every time he tried to apply for a job, rent an apartment, or open another account. He tried one last time to worm his way back in. He showed up at my door, looking thinner, his bravado gone. He didn't smirk this time, didn't lean back with that fake confidence. Instead, he mumbled something about being family and needing a second chance. For a moment, I almost felt the old pull, the instinct to help, to rescue. But then I pictured the Instagram photo, his hand flashing peace signs in a jacket he bought with my card, and the caption that mocked me, "New drip." And just like that, any sympathy evaporated. I told him plainly, "You made your choice when you thought showing off was worth more than respecting me. I'm not your bank. I'm not your safety net. And I'm not going to be your excuse anymore." His eyes flickered with anger, then shame, but he said nothing. He just turned and left, and for the first time in months, I closed the door and felt nothing but relief. From that day on, I stopped answering calls from relatives who only reached out to scold me. I stopped explaining myself, stopped defending my decision. Because the truth was, I didn't owe anyone an explanation. I had drawn a line, and that line saved me. And in the quiet that followed, I realized something I should have known all along. Sometimes family isn't the people who share your blood. Sometimes family is just the people who respect your boundaries. When the dust finally started to settle, I saw the ripple effect for what it really was. My cousin wasn't just exposed. The entire family dynamic had been cracked wide open. For years, everyone had leaned on me. The dependable one, the one with a steady job, the one who always helped out. Every time someone was short on rent, I was the one they called. Every holiday dinner, it was assumed I'd cover extra groceries or pick up the tab. And every time my cousin got himself into another mess, I was expected to step in quietly and fix it. But now, after I stood firm, they couldn't look at me the same way. At family gatherings, conversations would shift when I walked in. I caught the side glances, the muttered words. She betrayed her own cousin? She thinks she's better than us. All that money went to her head. But what none of them admitted, what sat in the silence between their words, was that they were scared. Scared because if I could stand up to him, I could stand up to them too. They could no longer count on me to carry everyone else's mistakes. My cousin's downfall became a warning to the rest of them. If you cross me, if you treat me like an ATM, there will be consequences. And for once, that thought didn't make me feel guilty. It made me feel free. Meanwhile, my cousin drifted further into the background. His friends stopped inviting him out when he couldn't flash cash anymore. His name came up less and less in conversations, except as a cautionary tale. Did you hear what happened to him? Man, he had it all and blew it. And me? I started focusing on myself for once. I took the money I used to waste bailing people out and started putting it into savings, into trips, into things that brought me actual joy. It was like I'd finally unplugged from a system that had been draining me for years. And the more distance I put between myself and their drama, the clearer it became. Protecting myself wasn't selfish, it was survival. And survival meant no longer letting anyone, cousin or otherwise, write checks on my life that I was forced to cash. Months passed, and the silence between me and my cousin turned into something permanent, a canyon neither of us tried to cross. What surprised me wasn't his absence. It was how much lighter my life felt without the constant pressure of his chaos weighing me down. For years, I had been conditioned to believe that being family meant sacrificing myself for others, no matter the cost. But once I broke that pattern, I realized just how much of my energy had been consumed by it. I started noticing the small freedoms, checking my credit card statement and seeing only my own purchases, walking into a store without that nagging anxiety of, what if something unexpected shows up? Even scrolling through Instagram without being blindsided by his smug grin in stolen clothes. The absence of his drama gave me room to breathe, and in that space, I started investing in myself. I signed up for a course I'd always wanted to take, went on a weekend trip with friends where every dollar spent was mine and mine alone, and even bought myself a small but meaningful gift, something I never would have done before because I was always worried about covering someone else's emergency. And yet, the family's judgment lingered in the background. My aunt would still throw passive-aggressive comments at gatherings. Some people forget blood is thicker than water, while my uncle muttered about loyalty. I learned to let it roll off me, because the truth was, their loyalty had never been to me, only to the fantasy that my cousin was worth protecting at all costs. He, meanwhile, was unraveling. I heard he'd moved back in with his parents, jobless, drowning in debt, scrambling to rebuild what little credibility he had left. Friends of friends told me he'd tried to start selling secondhand sneakers online, but with a reputation for scamming, no one trusted him. He'd gone from the loudest, flashiest person in the room to a ghost haunting his own mistakes. And for once, I didn't feel sorry for him. Instead, I felt a strange sense of justice, like the universe had finally caught up to him after years of skating by on lies and manipulation. The irony was, I didn't even have to lift a finger beyond protecting myself. I didn't scream, I didn't scheme, I didn't plot revenge. I just said no, drew a line, and held it. And that was enough to unravel everything he'd built on my back. Sitting with that realization, I finally understood that revenge doesn't always look like fire and fury. Sometimes it looks like silence. Sometimes it looks like turning off your phone, freezing a credit card, and watching as someone destroys themselves with the rope they thought they'd use to pull you under. And that kind of revenge, quiet and undeniable, is the kind that lasts. In the end, I didn't need to watch him collapse to know the story was finished. My cousin had taken what wasn't his, gambled on my silence, and lost everything he thought made him untouchable. The family still whispered, still tried to paint me as the one who went too far, but I didn't bother defending myself anymore. I didn't need their approval, and I didn't need their version of loyalty. What I needed was peace, and peace came the moment I chose myself over their endless demands. I realized then that family isn't defined by who shares your blood. It's defined by who respects your boundaries. And once I drew mine, I discovered that survival isn't selfish. It's necessary. My cousin will always be the one who posted new drip while drowning in someone else's debt, the one who thought image mattered more than integrity. But me, I'll always remember the day I finally said no, and how that one word freed me from years of being their safety net. Revenge didn't come with fireworks or dramatic confrontations. It came quietly, in the form of self-respect and the refusal to be used again. And that, more than anything, was the justice I deserved. So tell me, was I wrong for cutting him off completely, or did I finally go just far enough?